the transcendence of the traumatic experience, which is how do we change that? Not really in our thoughts. I don't even have to know really what someone remembers or not, because I can tell from their body and their bodily experience. So my piece is I know someone is transcending that experience when they actually then can tell the story and they say to me, I actually don't feel that way anymore.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges, the brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Ann Biasetti. We're going to be talking about how she helps people heal their relationship with food, their bodies, and improve their sense of self through somatic therapy, yoga, and compassion. Ann is a licensed clinical social worker and a certified yoga instructor, and she's the creator of the Befriending Your Body Program, which is a somatic self-compassion-based recovery program. This program helps people with eating disorders. She is also the author of Befriending Your Body, a self-compassionate approach to freeing yourself from disordered eating. We'll also be talking about her latest book, Your Body Never Meant You Any Harm. So let's jump in. This is Ann Biasetti. Okay. Good morning, Ann. I'm so happy to meet you and talk across the country. You're in Saratoga Springs, New York. I'm in Los Angeles, but we're going to connect through the internet and find out all about what you do. And let's start with the idea of what somatic therapy is. As
Great.
opposed to talk therapy, because we all know what talk therapy is. Oh, I got this problem.
Exactly.
Let's talk it through. What happened? Blah, blah. But this has to do with the body.
It does.
Let's just let the folks know what that is, because I hear certain words, and sometimes I can't wrap my head around what it actually means. So I have read about this, and experienced it also. So
great.
But for those who haven't, let them know.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So somatic therapy, I think it's interesting because you said, you've read about it and you can think about it, but actually somatic therapy is all about what we feel and, more importantly, what we sense in our body. So somatic therapy is working with this bottom-up approach. It's working with being able to help clients start to notice, name, and sense their internal experience. So that goes from everything from shifting states within their autonomic nervous system functioning, like when they're starting to get into a place of more hyper arousal, we call it more sympathetic activation, or when they start kind of checking out or going away from us, like when you're sitting there with a client and you can notice they start to maybe dissociate a bit or start to shut down. Those are really important shifts. Or when I notice that someone is talking, still using a lot of words, but their eyes are filling up with tears. And a lot of times we're taught to, let the client talk and continue to talk with that, and they're expressing emotion. But in a moment like that, I will ask a client if I can interrupt. I say, I'm just going to interrupt you for a moment to pause, because something important is happening in this moment. As you speak these words, there's something shifting inside. and your eyes are showing it. Are you aware of what that is? So somatic therapy is about bringing the internal awareness of our body that would normally stay unconscious to our conscious awakened moments. And it's bringing that to our conscious attention. And it's so important on so many levels, because when I say something like that to a client, let's say, they will often respond with, oh, yeah, I don't normally attend to those moments. I normally don't slow down, because feeling is hard, number one, but also they don't slow down to notice the sensations behind the feeling. And that's the interoception, which is what's happening in the inner body that is connected to this emotional response. And so when we awaken that, we awaken a whole new level of awareness that is normally not in our consciousness. So normally what's in our consciousness is the thoughts and intense emotion around an experience, but not our sensory experience and the way our body is responding to it. So somatic work is about that backdoor or bottom-up approach in consciousness.
It's an interesting thing about us being these biological creatures that have these physical reactions to environments. Obviously, a physical attack is the most obvious one. I just got punched in the face. It hurts.
Yeah.
I know where it hurts. It's throbbing, and I'm going to cry because it hurts. But what about other things that are going on that aren't so obvious?
That's right.
And it's, and because you just said it, because it's an unpleasant feeling, a lot of the time you want to go away from it.
Yes.
And,
yeah, exactly. And that's the hardest part. After all these years, 36 years of this work, sometimes people say, well, but what do you really do? And I said, well, number one is I get people more connected to their bodily experience. I said, but I really teach people how to re-feel. And that's such an important thing. I don't say I teach them how to feel, I teach them how to re-feel, because we're all born embodied, knowing a full range of emotion, and somewhere along and being comfortable with that, right? Our bodies actually being able to not be so afraid of that, being able to re-regulate around those emotions. And at some point along the way, the external world shuts that down for us. And we don't have free access, either because we've been told that's dangerous somehow or unsafe somehow to do so, or we just learned, as you said, as biological creatures, that, oh, when I have this emotional response, I'm not attended to, or it's not safe for me, or I'm actually told to shut that down. And so we learn very quickly what emotions feel safe to have and what emotions don't. And that's an unconscious response. It's not just, oh, I don't like to feel sad, or I don't like to feel angry or grief. It's, I don't know what to do with it in this body. I'm having such strong reactions. I don't know what to do.
I was just thinking about little babies. They don't have any of these filters on them yet. Boy, and they just scream and holler and cry and laugh, and they don't, and it's moment to moment. It isn't even continuously one thing, and you watch them, and we're always intrigued by babies, I think, because of that too. You don't get to see that level of expression in adults very often, and if you do, it's a little bit can be a little bit frightening, even on the upside. To see somebody who's super joyful can be a little intimidating for some people to see that.
That's right. That's right. Sometimes clients come in and when they come in and tell me that, oh, I'm just a Pollyanna and I'm happy all the time, but yet they're coming in to see me, part of what I understand is that, oh, okay, I already know that this is, a human soul that has a really hard time staying present to the pain. And that's okay, because then I know that's our job, and it's really important for me somatically as a somatic therapist to be able to sit with that too. That's been a big part of my training. And, I have a background also as a yoga therapist, and I'm a transpersonal psychologist, which really brought me into a lot of the studies of Eastern spirituality, and, yoga and meditation and Buddhist studies. And so I, in my own personal work, have been very practiced in, okay, how do I sit with my own pain and suffering and those emotions and how my body responds to it so that I can sit with another's, because that's a big deal, to be able to just be across from someone and hold that experience for them. And that's how they can regulate around it again. That's how their body can feel safe around these strong emotions again.
I think is probably the biggest skill that a therapist can have is to create an environment where the person feels safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And which is a lot of times not talking, just,
yes,
and letting someone just experience what's going on with their body. I've done all kinds of different types of therapies, from body work to, talk therapy. That's sort of the big spectrum, yoga, all these kinds of things that I've done. That's why I started this podcast, because I wanted people to be able to find out about all these different ways to approach expanding yourself.
Yes.
And I have to say that at some points, and I've talked about this, that talk therapy, you just go, I don't want to talk about this anymore. It hasn't changed anything.
That's right.
It's helped me to uncover certain things, maybe discover a few things, but I'm still reacting in a similar way. It might be a couple of notches better, but the way I look at it is I can talk about somebody pokes me in the chest with their finger, right? I didn't like that. It made me feel small. It made me intimidated. And I tell you this 15 times, yet I've still been poked in the chest, and I want to scream and I want to punch and I want.
That's right. That's right. Your body wants to do something about that poke, because guess what? It has it remembers a similar experience internally from pokes in the past that may have been totally different, but had a similar experiential felt sense.
Yeah.
And that's what's so important on that somatic level. And as you're saying, if we keep, as a matter of fact, and I specialize in trauma work, and the transcendence of the traumatic experience, which is how do we change that? Not really in our thoughts. I don't even have to know really what someone remembers or not, because I can tell from their body and their bodily experience. So my piece is, I know someone is transcending that experience when they actually then can tell the story and they say to me, I actually don't feel that way anymore. Like, they can tell the story and not self-identify with it anymore, both on a level of self and the way they structure their self-belief, but also on the way that their body responded. They'll say, I thought that memory, and I felt safe for the first time when I had that thought again, or when I had that memory again. And that's how I know that their body has completely, their autonomic nervous system has basically regulated around that experience. It's shifted, it's changed, and it's sort of saying from the inside out, like, yeah, we remember this, but I don't care as much about it anymore, because I'm here, I'm safe, I'm protected, and I'm in the now. And I'm not transported away into the past anymore on a bodily experience level like I used to be. And that's the real trauma resolution work, if we're really going to talk about it internally.
Well, that's the freedom from it. It's
yeah. So it's a beautiful thing.
I was looking at some of the techniques. I looked up somatic therapy before we started talking, just to see what some of the specific techniques are. And you want to talk about some of those and how you sort of make a decision, which one to go for?
I like to say I have a very eclectic approach. So I was someone, because I came many, many, many years ago through the training of yoga therapy. I never wanted to go the traditional route of training in somatic work that's very popular. Like I love all the somatic therapies out there. We're all after the same thing, which is nervous system regulation and bringing that unconscious to the consciousness through the body. But I decided that, anatomy and teaching people about their inner body experience was so important. And a lot of those mainstream somatic therapies just didn't have that for me. They were working with the nervous system. But as a yoga therapist, guess what? I can tell someone, something? Can I just roll out the mat a second and put you into an amazing pose that is going to regulate your nervous system within 7 minutes? And they're like, yeah, let me feel that. So when I'm trying to teach someone about breath or have them experience ease in their body when all they've experienced is distress, either from chronic pain or these traumatic experiential reactions that their body's having, I can actually give them a moment of relief and on the felt level of experience, so that they can walk away from my office that day and say, oh my gosh, I never even knew that my shoulder was this way. I had someone recently in the medical profession, this person themselves, who came in with all this bodily pain. No one's been able to help. I had this person experience some therapeutic restorative yoga, and the person discovered, wait a second, I thought this was my right side that was really hurting me. Instead, I taught her, oh no, she discovered it was her left side QL muscle, her quadratus lumborum, and she was amazed and that brought up a lot of memory and experience for her about, oh my goodness, injury on that side, emotional experience about things in her past, that's the somatic therapy that then we're able to process. So she really walked away with a whole new anatomical understanding about her body and felt so good for the first time. And the pain shifted too. So she had wrapped in there, when we bring the body in ease like that, and I can teach people about their anatomical experience and what's happening in there in the body, they walk away with agency, number one, because they understand and know their body better, and they can have an impact on it, and their body responds. That's huge. That's empowerment. And then they also walk away with interoceptive knowledge. So the biggest skill that I work through, and I teach and train people with Dr. Cynthia Price at the Center for Mindful Body Awareness, where all her research is on interoceptive awareness, which really I say is a super skill. It's about understanding the internal landscape of our body, like what's really happening on the inside on a sensory level. So I will incorporate all that interoception through questioning, through language, through helping them to gain access to that deeper bodily sensory experience, where a lot of somatic therapies stay just on the autonomic nervous system level, but don't go into that interoception, which is essential because it's actually a brain skill, and we can change the way the brain is operating and responding in that moment when we teach interoception, and it's long lasting, and that secures autonomic functioning. So a lot of times we're going just for the nervous system and we forget about interoception, but when we teach that important skill, we're actually creating an internal brain skill that regulates our autonomic functioning.
I'm just thinking about how the way our society is structured and the things that are prevalent, and if a lot of these things that maybe people sort of intuitively used to know how to do,
yes,
and that the way that things are structured keeps people from even knowing about that. And I'm not talking about intellectual knowing. I'm talking about body knowing. There's certain things everyone does when they're in a situation. Scream, sigh, cry, maybe physically do something to get the tension out. I mean, there's things you can sort of see, but then there's subtler kinds of ways that we internalize these things.
Absolutely.
Even as I'm talking about it, I will say that I'm feeling funny in my throat right now. Just a
Yeah,
little bit.
that's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. You see, and that is exactly what I'll ask people to point their attention to, because you said two things very important. One is, these everyday things that we may be doing. That's actually the first way I direct people in. I talk about this in my book because the book really threads interoception and interoceptive development throughout the entire 10 chapters. And in the very beginning, one of the skills I use to ask people to develop is taking those everyday things that you do and doing exactly what you did, which is I'm talking, but what's my talking like inside right now? And when
Yeah.
you drop that question in, like you said, oh, I have a funny feeling in my throat, or, before I came on with you, it doesn't matter how many of these I do, right? I do a ton of podcasts, this and that, but I can come on every time and I'll feel that little fluttering in my chest.
Mm-hmm.
What's
Yeah.
that experience? It's both excitement, but it's also nervousness too, right? And that's a
Mm-hmm.
moment for me interoceptively to be like, oh, yeah, my heart responds to these moments in a mixed way, in a very blended way, both in excitement and, happiness, but also in feeling afraid. And then thoughts arise. Will I make a mistake or whatever? This is the human experience. But the other piece of what you said that I really want to point out, because this to me is the most important and why the part one of my book is dedicated to really this whole experience, which is the world takes us away from this. We live in a mind-body divided world. It used to be just culture, but really our dominant culture has spread all over the world. And so even cultures that used to be more connected like that are now experiencing that same division. So as you said, we are born just interoceptively, we are born with that developing while we're in utero. It's amazing. And so babies are that's the only way they're operating to survive and get their needs met is through their interoceptive knowledge, through their sensory knowledge. So what happens, that's the real question, what happens along the way to pull us away from that embodied knowledge? Because that's embodied knowledge, it's relationship. We're born in relationship with our bodies. And then we lose that because the external world pulls us so far into just cognition and mind over bodily experience that we no longer know how to listen. And so we lose that internal communication skill. And it's unfortunate because, again, I call it really the super skill for both empowerment and agency in our bodies. Like this person I was saying can now go to her doctor and say, I discovered that even though my right side is where I'm having most of the pain, it's actually my left side that needs more of the help. If she goes to her PT now, she can express that. So it's just a big, big piece that's been missing. And the world continues to take us out. The focus, as I write about in the book, on image over bodily experience and sensation is one of the primary reasons that we lose this investigation.
What do you mean by that, image?
Well, when the world is, as between social media and everywhere around us, we are pulled out into body image, especially as women. It's I dedicate, the book primarily to women. I hope everyone will read it because it's so important for everyone to understand this division and why this happened and how we can come back. But marketing does a phenomenal job, and so does social media, at constantly pulling us out through what we see over what we sense. And that's a real message that I give throughout the book is, how can we calm down the overuse of this one sensory organ, our eyesight, constantly using that, and how can we go into these other amazing sensory organs that we have that can actually connect us to interoception. When I'm teaching that skill, I have people soften their gaze or close their eyes so that they can take away sight, so that it's the first signal to our brain to be able to drop in and get a little quieter.
You think that, and I probably agree with, I mean, I know I agree with this, that women have a much more intense relationship with how they look and therefore how they might feel based on that.
Yes.
And that it creates a certain amount of discomfort if they don't look the way they think they're supposed to, or what they think the ideal might be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it happens very young, very young.
Yeah.
Very young. And the sad part with it is, I say, on an embodied level, really, if we look at it even on a hormonal level, right? Our hormones are bathing our brain in bonding, connection, cooperation, for survival. I mean, this is what our hormones do. And women, unfortunately, move so far away from that at a very young age. All of a sudden comes in comparison and competition and divide.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. Anyone who has a daughter, I remember my own daughter who's now 24, at age 7, when they're young, innocent, free, using their bodies, and they don't even think about it. And then all of a sudden, someone points out what's different. This is better on me than that on you. My legs look nicer here, or my hair looks nicer here. And you just don't, when you hang around these little ones, because I have twin boys, men that are now 28, but when I hung around their school, they were my first, at those ages, 7, 8, they're playing and laughing and wrestling and this and that, and they're not talking about what they look like. So what happens with that? I'm not saying that young boys aren't exposed to this, because they are, and it's getting infiltrated everywhere now. However, you hang around with those little girls. I was shocked with my daughter at how young it was that little girls were starting to compare and compete based on what they were wearing, what they looked like, who liked them, who didn't like them. It's just very, very disturbing, and yet very fascinating at the same time for the work that I do. And as a researcher, Dr. Neva Puron, her name is, and I use her a lot in my work and teaching about embodiment. And she's done longitudinal qualitative studies on young girls and at what ages they really lose their agency and start focusing on this divide, and really lose their bodily experience. And the reason why eating disorders are so much more prevalent in young girls than boys. But again, it's shifting, but it's still, the percentage is a drastic difference.
I also wonder about how much of it is just a biological thing of, on a super primal level of, if I don't look a certain way, I'm not going to secure a mate and have a child. That's underneath a lot of this stuff, but then there's so many layers of dumb on top of it.
So many layers. That biological drive, actually Dr. Piron talks a lot about this, that's, again, our hormones, that's our desire to be desired. Who doesn't have that? That's human nature, actually. And we want to belong. So whether that belonging is, as far as relationship and romantic experience or sexual experience, that's one thing. But really the other end of it, from that young kids don't understand yet, is that they just want to fit in and belong. They all want to belong. That's just the human experience. And that's what's healing. So the world, unfortunately, gives the message that the way to belong is through how you appear.
Yeah. And then there's a whole other aspect to it, which is within different cultures and subcultures, there's a look that is acceptable, or in America, it's well, just to be in a broad stroke, the Barbie look.
Yes, yes, yes. Becoming
Which,
even more popular now.
well, it's very bizarre, and
Yes, yes.
you see women with dyed blonde hair and tons of makeup and Botox and boob jobs and all these things that are to look like the ideal hot woman.
Yes.
Um,
At any age, too, at any
yeah.
age, which is a
Well, and
really
some mothers
scary
do it
thing.
with their children.
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
and I look at that stuff, and what's really odd to me is that there's a sameness
Hmm.
that is so boring, and so it's underneath it. To me, it's like really sad. It makes me sad to see somebody so desperately trying to be something that they are not,
Yes.
weren't born as, and that if I can fit into that in that realm, and maybe hit a high number of success, then it's all, and then I'm going to get certain things,
Yes.
a man, a house, children. I'm going to get all these things, acceptance. I'm going to, even competitively, I'm going to be ahead of most other. We'll just talk about women.
Yeah.
And then here's where it's balanced on the head of a pin. It's going to make me happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is the riskiest component, as we know, right? Because what is that?
Yeah.
And the fleeting moments, I write in the book, in the later chapter, when I talk about this, I say there's a Rinpoche in the Tibetan book of living and dying. I read that so many years ago in my doctoral program, and I was laughing because he says, when we talk about the obsession we have with the body and all of this, he calls it the decoration of the body, the decoration, the clothes, the hair, the makeup, the this, the that, the constant attempts at happiness and alleviation of some kind of suffering by doing all this. And he said, it's like going into a hotel room and redecorating the hotel room. Every time you go in, you're still going to leave.
Yeah.
We're still going to age. Well, actually, we're all going to get sick, right? We don't know if we're going to age, right? I feel lucky at this point to have aged. And, yes, I have some things, medically unwell, but for the most part, I can still function. So I feel very grateful for that. But we don't always get the chance to age, do we? And we're all going to die, and these bodies are all going to wither away. And so what I say, because I teach a lot of women and go and teach them on retreats and what have you, and I am not one that's going to say, do this or don't do this. I make a joke, I love to decorate, and I like to do my hair and I like to put on some makeup. I do it for me, and I know it's temporary and has nothing to do with my happiness. It has to do with actually a history, even culturally for me, that my Italian ancestry, all the women did their hair, they did their makeup. My mom, when she had dementia, she passed last year at almost 94. But the last few years, even with dementia and not knowing who we were anymore, she'd look in a mirror and she'd say, "Who is that?" And when we dyed her hair, when we took her to the beauty parlor and got her hair done and set, she'd look in the mirror and she recognized herself. So I said, she didn't recognize herself with all the gray hair because she would get it done all the time. And so it was a moment of joy for her, even though it was so temporary. She'd laugh and look in the mirror and we'd have this joyous moment together. And so those things I say all the time to women, if it brings you temporary joy, understand that. This is a moment of temporary joy. It's going to disappear. And so when we're in that cosmetic, industry, and there's the chase and the nonstop, and there's the constant change of, as you're saying, what the body's natural inclination is, then there's another story going on.
Well, I like that idea of recognizing something for what it is and not making it the whole picture. Like, I like this. This feels good. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
I know it's not the overarching trajectory of my entire life, but
No.
I want to get dressed up and I want to go have have a good time. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yes.
Exactly, exactly. So I do that because I do believe that that's what happens out in our world because we love to be binary. These minds love to be binary with everything. So, it's like, oh, okay, if I'm going to, accept my body or I'm going to be embodied, that means that I have to get rid of all of these kinds of things. And I'm like, no, that's not true. You just have to know that it's temporary and it's not going to take away or bypass the work, the deeper work of learning how to reveal, of learning your sensory information. It's not going to bypass all of that. And how to be protective. I don't know if I'm opening a can of worms, but I could just say for myself, I have autoimmune illness. And these things, these cosmetic procedures like Botox, things like that, it's a neurotoxin. And so I have learned in my body that anything, I very quickly learned this with foods and other supplements even and things like that, that if I ingest something that is really foreign to my body, I have a huge flare of my autoimmune illness. So I can't find information out there on things like Botox and fillers and all that. Like, what do they do in that instance, inside the body? So embodiment is a protective factor. So I look at something like that and believe me, the culture is around. It's not like I don't get pulled toward those things saying like, what would it be like, to not have these wrinkles anymore or whatever it may be. But I'm not going to go near it because I'm in relationship with my body and I'm more protective with it over my desire to look a certain way because I have no idea what that's going to do to my body. And I'm afraid. I'm actually afraid. And if I'm in a fear response and going to get something like that, I guarantee you it will have a reaction in me,
Yeah. Fear-based decision-making is almost always a mistake.
Yeah.
Or there's a negative result. I was just thinking, I don't know how, I love when I talk to somebody and I'll get an image in my head that doesn't seem to be completely related. But so I just had this image of my grandmother who, she was 100 when she died.
Wow. Amazing.
She was a tiny little woman, a Russian immigrant, came over to the United States in the very late 1800s.
Great.
And never did anything in terms of cosmetics, anything like that. Nothing. I'm sure I know she was clean and she did certain things, and once in a while she would put on lipstick or something. I can even remember that. But I used to look at her face, which had very deep lines and it was super soft, and I would just touch it. I was a little kid, just like, can I touch your face, Grandma? And I would do that. And then she would touch my face, and we just, sit there and kind of rub each other and on our faces. Just love, just was really sweet. And as she aged, we got even more and more. And it never even occurred to her to do anything other than just live.
Yeah.
And my mom was similar. Although she would go to the beauty parlor and get her hair crispy.
Yes. The 1 week hold, right?
Yeah. And I was thinking about just how beautiful my grandmother's face was with those lines. And you'd see these eyes that had a softness and a love and a wisdom to them. At least that's how I interpreted it as a kid, piercing through that wrinkled skin. And I just thought it was the most beautiful energy.
Yeah.
Then I remember going as a very little kid when my mother would go to this beauty parlor, and all the women in there were getting a very similar
yes, the
hairdo, and lots of and then they would go under a dryer. It was these big domed things, and they'd sit under them and read magazines.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, it smells terrible in here. It was just these chemicals that were frying their hair and making, there was color, and I don't know what you do to make the hair flip up like they used to have.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And I remember telling her, I go, don't take me
Times.
there anymore. It smells bad.
But that's just it. It's the times. And it's so interesting because you have that memory, as a little boy, as you're saying, and I have that memory as a little girl. Only the memory I have as a little girl is being in awe of all these ladies. Like, wow, look how they went in and look
Yeah.
how they're coming out. It was like this transformation. And I actually have a reflection in the book that's exactly this. I ask people to go back as far as they can, generations of the women in their lives, to understand and to watch when diet culture and the beauty industry really took hold. And I go back to my great Nana, and I never knew her. I was apparently, I think I was the second to last grandchild that she held. Apparently, she rocked all the great grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was the second to last. So she passed when I was still an infant. But I heard all the stories about her. And it was the stories exactly like that, that she always dressed in, the long dresses and had her hair, the kerchief and the idea, the embodied idea I have of her is that she was just this powerful, strong matriarch.
Mm-hmm.
And I write in the book that I envision, like, I don't think she probably even thought about an image. She had work to do. She had things to do. She had people to take care of. She lived in the house with my grandmother, with my mother and father and the family and all of that. So, there was a lot of people to take care of and feed and cook and clean and take care of the house. So, it's an interesting thing. And then we go down these generations. And when I look at my mom's generation, well, it hit big. It hit big at that point in the 50s and the 60s with women and some of the freedoms that they had, canned foods, that came around, frozen foods. But really, this is a big deal, that there was this freedom and then there was more exploration of coming out and being out in the world. And so how it was passed down, as you said, there is that experience. And I remember being in that beauty parlor, sitting for hours as I watched her under the dryer, but then being so excited about the experience of watching how she came out of that, and look how she looks now. And, and so it was really passed down as a little girl to both my sister and myself that like this was important. This was important. This look out in the world was important. And to have a certain look out in the world was important. So that led, I laughed, that led in the 80s to myself of getting all those horrific perms. And I say to my daughter, I used to have straight hair. I said, but I think I burnt it away in the 80s with those horrible perms,
Those were funny.
Yes, exactly. So it's interesting the things that we adopt according to the cultural standards of the time that tell us what is deemed acceptable and belonging.
So you work with a lot of, I would say mostly women on eating disorders.
And body image disturbance and trauma. But I do work with many men as well. But when I center my work, I have a program, an 8-week somatic program for those that are experiencing any kind of disordered eating. And that I've had men come into that program multiple times, but I would say it's primarily women. In the retreats that I do specify those for women only. Not that I don't want my male counterparts, learning about this as well. It's just that I'd like to make it a safe and sacred space for women to talk about things that are hard for other people to understand, like the experience of I was teaching, we have a local wonderful college here, Skidmore College, and I was once teaching a developmental course there to the undergrad students. And we were in this timeline and we were talking about the influence of society upon the self. And I asked the question in the class of 28 students, I would say half male, half female identified. I asked the question, how many of you feel safe walking across the campus at night? And all the males raised their hand, not one female raised their hand. So, when I teach these retreats, I want it to be a place that is safe and feels safe within their bodies to talk about those things too, to talk about what it's like to grow up with the messages embedded and absorbed within that you are not very safe out in the world in a female body that's desired. It's a really confusing message. Like we were saying earlier, biologically, we all want to be desired. It's belonging. So yeah, we want to be desired, and then it's unsafe to be desired. It's, excuse my language, it's effed up, right?
Yeah, it sure is.
Really a confusing message. Yeah.
Yeah, that idea of having, as a woman, having to scan all around you and be super hyper aware of a potential threat.
Yes.
I don't have that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Never had it. I mean, obviously I've been in situations that are precarious and I'm aware of that, but it isn't 24/7 where every time I go out, I'm looking at, and I always, I feel for women that women have to feel that, or feel that they have to feel that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it really, it's an unfortunate piece. It's actually, I've spoken to, women, I have women at ages, 17 to 87 at those retreats. And it's amazing generationally how they're still expressing things like that, just in different forms. It's really disturbing, and here I am, I'm searching. My daughter is graduating from a graduate program. I'm helping her look for a new apartment. And what do I write to the realtor? Someplace that's safe. And, and when my son was looking, not that I don't want him to be in a location of that, but it's a different kind of safety that I'm exploring, And so, yeah, it's just interesting. That was on my mind just this morning as I was reaching out to the real estate agencies. So it's an odd thing. It's an odd thing that we're, having to just be in that reality and not bypass that, because what happens is if we bypass that external experience, then we make it an individual experience. We say, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me that I want to hide away? Or people in larger bodies who are horrifically oppressed and feel like they don't belong, they will self-blame. And that leads to terrible self-hatred. And it's meanwhile, you're like, really? This world has sent you that message from the time you were a tiny little one. But without that understanding, then we go along and we take that as, unfortunately, a self-representation, and it deeply affects our self-worth, not just our self-esteem. It deeply affects what we believe we deserve in this life, and that's a depth experience.
Right, you're walking around in a self-imposed prison.
That's right.
In a good therapeutic situation, one of the things a therapist can do is give you permission to not do that anymore.
Yes.
To open the window a little bit to other possibilities.
That's right. Exactly. And that's, often what I'll bring up even from the start with folks that I work with, especially if they, let's say it is their experience of being in a larger body and being marginalized, I will share with them, hey, listen, I have the privilege of walking through the world in a typical, body that does not stand out that way. So I don't know their lived experience. And, but I, basically say to them, are you okay with working with me? Give me the privilege of working with you, even though I don't have that lived experience. I certainly have others, especially if they've gone through disordered eating. Well, yeah, I had that as a kid, as a teenager, but was never in the experience of a larger body. Often what I say to people is, yeah, I was able to forget about my suffering for a while because I could go out in the world and still be wanted and desired and seem like I belonged, and nobody knew my internal suffering. But someone in a larger body doesn't have that experience. They go out and they're still in the suffering. People think they see the suffering because of their size.
Well, it's more of a billboard of.
That's right.
It's an outward appearance of what you just assume is something going on internally.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I do is I go to this yoga studio, and so I'm waiting a lot of times, outside the door for the class to get out, and so I can go in. And there's a certain number of fairly overweight women that go to this place, which, big applause to them for going to do that. And I'm a fairly friendly guy most of the time. And I will go out of my way to actually get in a conversation with somebody that looks like that, because I can see that they're guarded in terms of the way they've been perceived, and what they've gotten as feedback, or being ignored. And so I go out of my way to get in a conversation about anything. I don't really care what it is.
Again, I don't have the lived experience, but I will speak, if I may, on behalf of people that I know have the lived experience. And most of those women would say, don't talk to me just because you feel bad for me. So
I actually don't feel bad for them.
Okay.
I actually don't. What I feel is I feel bad that they may be treated a certain way, but I don't feel bad for them. I mean, because you don't know why somebody is the way they are. The pain is invisible. It's a little more sort of obvious if somebody's, overweight, that there's probably some internal pain. But I sort of see it as everybody suffers about something. And some things are more obvious, but I'm just curious to see what makes this person who they are. I'm genuinely interested in people and why, how they move through the world. This was an interesting conversation. There was this woman who had, forget what it was, a tattoo on her arm, and I can't remember what it was now. And I said, wow, that's a really interesting tattoo. That's how I started it. She was standing, a foot away from me. And she goes, oh, I got this for my husband. It symbolizes something with her husband. Oh, that's really sweet. She goes, yeah, he died 8 months ago. And I started talking to her about that. So now, had I not had this conversation or started it with just a simple thing, I would not have known that this person was really hurting about the loss of her husband.
And it's a conversation, like you're saying, that for any size has nothing to do really with size. I hear
no, not at all.
Saying, yeah. And that's the important piece, because again, as a body advocate, I like to say that out in the world, that really I'm a protector of all bodies, no matter what. And we just live in a world that is extremely fat phobic. And so we do have to be super careful in that understanding that, just because someone is in a larger body, it does not necessarily mean they're in suffering. We have no idea. I tell the story all the time. When I was younger and was in an extremely thin body, with anorexia as a teenager, and nobody asked me about my suffering. And nobody asked at all, because I fit in. So again, it's a really strange place that we live in. And now we're seeing out in the world this really dangerous invitation into this extreme, like the heroin chic look again. And
I know.
I thought we were done with that, in the 70s and everything else, but no, here we are again. So and in the world of, there's no respect that there could potentially be health at every size. We have no idea. Like, I have friends that are, in larger bodies, and my cholesterol is through the roof, to where my cardiologist is like, we have to talk about that next time, and then I have friends in larger bodies where their blood work is perfectly fine. And I'm the one walking around with these autoimmunes and everything else. And I live what would appear to be the quote unquote, according to standards, healthiest lifestyle, right? I'm a yoga therapist. I'm a meditator. I, interoceptively eat and all this kind of stuff. and my body has its own path. So I just like to put that out there, because I just hear the discrimination all the time that, folks in larger bodies must be unwell in some way. And that's really not the case.
You can't really go wrong if you come from trying to be kind.
Yes.
In whatever situation.
We don't have enough of, that's for sure.
Yeah. Even if somebody's difficult, I kind of look at it as a challenge, not necessarily to win them over, but to be kind. And sometimes I'm very good at it, and other times I have no interest in it whatsoever.
And it's a hard one. I often say, we have to consider that. Like, can we really teach someone, to be kind, if kindness is not already a value, that was instilled from a really young age? It's the hard one.
That certainly helps. But I think you can retrain yourself, act as if, until it becomes the thing. I think that can happen to a huge degree.
Yeah. Yes.
It's, to me, one of the biggest challenges there is just to be in that place where somebody isn't an adversary or a threat. I do try to remember, and it's not that easy to do, but that people do have, nobody's got it all together. It's impossible. Absolutely impossible.
Absolutely not. I always say, just on this human path, trying to figure it out. What did Ram Dass say, right? We're just walking each other home. And we either know how to walk together or we don't. And that's my other big, huge part of the work and my own personal practice through all these years has been in compassion and self-compassion. And, hey, how do we be kind and kinder still, both to ourselves and to others? If we're not kind to ourselves, it's really hard to be kind to others. So it's just, that's such an important piece that I really love people to learn the skill of too, is really how to quiet the critical. Because when we're walking around in that critical mindset of our own and not even knowing we're doing it, we're already divided from others just on that level, because we don't feel worthy then, so the self-kindness is crucial. For the more people think, it's going to create selfishness. It's the opposite. Actually, all research on self-compassion shows the kinder we are to ourselves, the more compassionate we actually become with others.
Well, on that note, let's talk about the title of your book.
Sure.
And a little bit what's in it, and the rest of the things that you have, and websites, all these wonderful things where people can contact you.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So the book releases July 21st through Shambhala Publications. It's called Your Body Never Meant You Any Harm. And that title was very specific. I actually insisted on it because it's really a book of somatic healing and forgiveness dedicated to women. It's embodiment. And the title really, when you look at those words, read those words, I ask people to embody those words right away. And it means different things to everyone. Like, oh, okay. Well, let me see what's in here. And it was based on an independent qualitative research study on body forgiveness and embodiment, and what it really took for women to move from the suffering, the pain, and the rift that they had in their mind-body divide to this path of really feeling back in relationship with their body. And it's 10 chapters. It's a very specific iterative process that guides people back into their somatic experience and interoception to be back in communication and relationship with their body. And so that will be out on the 21st. And then I have my two websites, An Embodied Life. So it's A-N, not Ann. It's anembodiedlife.com.
Okay.
And the Befriending Your Body Program.com, where that program is based on my first book, Befriending Your Body. And that is the somatic program for disordered eating, body image issues that I do virtually. So that's a global program. It's wonderful to see all different cultures in that program, backgrounds. And so that's where folks can find me. And on Instagram, and Embodied Life, and on Facebook as well.
Well, you are accessible, and that's a wonderful thing. A good use of social media.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Access to wonderful things is the best part about social media.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for your time and all your wonderful
you.
insights and your great personality and all the wonderful things that you do.
Thank you so much, Bob. It was a pleasure to be here.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. You can also listen on YouTube. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, I want to thank Anne Biasetti for being on the show. If you want to find out more, you can go to one of two websites. First one is anembodiedlife.com, and the second one is befriendingyourbody.com. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.